kina te hau, he hau koko uri, no runga I te whanui a tānei, iri koe tea te haere ki uta, ki te toe whenua hinerehia, a tāne rorei, I tēnei te hakatu I tōku whare, hei tirohanga makoutou, anei te whare, kua tū te whare. Tēnā tātou e te whānau, bon dia, ōtāre, ola. Tēnā tātou katoa. My name is Tangaroa Paul, Tangaroa Paul, and this is my kaupapa kōrero. Kia ora. This kaupapa kōrero stems from my PhD kaupapa research studies, and I dedicated this thesis to the takatāpui of the past, who, although often nameless or erased, have lived lives that have shaped the world. The overview for my kōrero is as follows. Traditional and contemporary poi, which is the main focus, which is what I'm holding or swinging in the image here. I then move on to poi on and off stage in regards to performing arts. I then jump into discussing the terms of irarere and takatāpuitanga. I then go on to talk about challenging the norm in terms of our society, both culturally as Māori and wider society. Finishing off with acknowledging the past, present, and the hopes for the future. And the name of this kōrero is Rere Te Taku Poi, the vessel for true identity and expression. Poi origin. So the image in the middle here is a form of a traditional making of a poi, which is taken from natural fibres from flax and has been stripped and refined to be able to create and weave rope. And then right at the end there is the ball elements as well of the wrapping of that flax around stones. And the purpose of poi in our traditional culture was predominantly and introduced by our men as a training tool. And that training tool was used to create strength and dexterity in the wrists and forearms to help our men and warriors in particular to prepare them for hand-eye coordination and the wielding of our weapons with the images on each side of our poi. And again, these were tools to help our men, or in particular our warriors, to prepare themselves for combat and war. Today, however, in contemporary society, or in contemporary Māori society culturally, poi has been evolutionised to the point where we've gone to more softer materials like cotton and plastic bags and what we call mattress foam. But again, the purpose of a poi is to again create dexterity and strengthen the wrists and forearms, but it also is now used as a percussion instrument within our Māori performing arts known as poi. And in this case, poi today is predominantly understood and recognised as a female's item and predominantly performed by our wahine or females on kapahaka competitions or on stage. And as I'd just like to point out to this image is of this particular year, this kapahaka group known as Te Whānau Apene, which is where some of our cohort members come from. And I'd just like to acknowledge that although that the idea of poi is to be in sync and have synchronicity, you can still see in each individual wahine performing this that they have been able to articulate or extend that use of poi as an expression of who they are. In terms of the transition into kapahaka, from the 1970s onwards, we created the idea of what kapahaka was, which is kapa meaning group, and then haka meaning the war dance. And this has been articulated as our Māori performing art form. However, from the 1990s onwards, we started to have a resurgence of our men performing poi within kapahaka itself. This following video or short clip is of that example of both our wahine and tāne, men and women, performing the poi. And in particular, I just want to acknowledge or plug this rōpū, and this is one of my whānau groups known as Te Rōpū Manutaki, who are recognised as one of the, or have been acclaimed as one of our top kapaka groups over those years of the 90s. Just a short clip. And just as an example of what poi looked like in the 1990s. So moving on into, I guess, defining my terms. This idea is around the blurring of gender binaries. So the first term is takatapui, which was a term coined by some of our Māori academics to articulate and describe Māori who identify as being queer or part of the LGBTQI+ community. But in no way does it explicitly identify their sexuality or gender identity, but rather acknowledges their entire being and their ability to be of both male and female consciousness or expression of femininity and masculinity. The following, the next term is Rere. Ira on its own describes as a person's or individual's consciousness, but ira can also traverse into things of a metaphysical nature. The term irarere sort of stems out of this idea of irarua, which is the binary gender, but for takatapui who are able to express that fluidity in nature, in practice, we identify that as irarere. All of these concepts came out of my doctoral thesis looking at an artistic reconsideration of gender role differentiation through the nature of performance. And I just want to allude to the image next to those terms, which I, alongside my wonderful supervisors, articulate this as the whare takatapui. We've seen images of whare in some of our previous presentations. This, however, is not a physical whare in itself. If anything, this whare flows between darkness and light, the physical and metaphysical, and is, I guess, another way of expressing that fluidity in our nature. Part of this is, again, identifying this idea of takiwātanga, or space in time rather than time itself. The images and the kōrero on our screen now is some examples pulled from my doctoral thesis, where I invited my research participants to have a photo shoot, and I'm so grateful to Associate Professor Marcos Stiegel for being the photographer on this project. So e mihi ana, kei taku hoa. In the images, I asked my participants to dress themselves in two forms. One in blacks, and the purpose of that was to show their everyday passing look in terms of how they present themselves in their everyday form. I then asked them to then adorn themselves in clothing or in any type of way that they felt like expressed their true, authentic selves. And in particular, these images were pulled as an expression of kapahaka and their love for performing arts. The quotes here were pulled from poems that were created from the interviews that I conducted with my participants, and I've just pulled examples of how some of our participants have articulated this idea of being irarere. So I'm just going to recite them. Boy, no. Girl, no. Just changing, being and existing. I am not just talking about poi. More than gender, our entire being. Ira tangata is infinite. Male has mauri and wairua. Within that is a bit of femininity. It is part of the ira tangata. Spirit in itself, we are male or female, spiritually can be fluid. Your wairua, being in this world. The following clips are just examples of how our takatapui men of today have been able to reclaim the use of poi and expression of poi and their fluidity by removing themselves from the stage performative aspects where they're just able to capture themselves in their most authentic form. And this is just some examples. He likes to take his time, sorry. In terms of challenging the norm, I would like to sort of give a timeline in terms of how we looked at poi in regards to kapahaka or Māori performing arts. From the 1980s through to the 1990s, it is not known as well, but we had whakawahine, which is our term to describe our trans women, who were renowned for creativity in poi. And if anything, a lot of those who understood the complexity of poi items were performed and created by whakawahine or takatapui people. And then moving on from the idea of takatapui who only taught or created these items, from the 2000s onward, we had more involvement on stage and our, I guess, having the ability and the freedom to be able to take the stage and express ourselves in our fluidity as our overall being. I'd like to point out to these two images of one of my close friends, Rere, who was known as a takatapui influence within our world and our communities, who has really pushed the boundaries. As of last year, or even earlier, I guess from 2020 onwards, a group known as Angi 2 have pushed the boundaries around this gender binary, where Rere and his best friend Tuhoi Tamai Maria were able to push the boundaries around their ability to walk in between and perform both the masculine and feminine natures of kapahaka. And again, the images are of Rere performing haka and poi. Again, this is an example of the ability to use poi as a tool of expression. This image here is of me as a little child at Punareo. Punareo is an early childhood education centre fully immersed within a Māori way of being, holistic Māori worldview and the Māori language. If you don't know, I'm the cute one in the front, right in front. Again, I'm showing the women, the girls and the boys how to perform properly. So yeah, this is just an example. And the words next to my image is pulled from my poem that was in the book from Rere. So performing poi, I am introverted, sometimes. Normal, sometimes lost. Exploring spaces, gender, fluidity. Navigating a place in this world, or in the world, discovering being me. I never knew how much this image in particular would mean to me 20 plus years later. If anything, I feel like that little boy there knew way more who he was than I do of myself now. But this journey in academia has allowed me to navigate this space in such a way that makes me reaffirm my cultural connectedness to who I am, but also to my people and my culture. Yes, moving on. These three images are just, I guess, a timestamp of the past, present, and future. The image on the left is from the book Rere, and I just want to quickly acknowledge Sama, who was the graphic artist of my book, and I'm so grateful to you, my friend, for all your help in this journey. And of course, with the advice and the guidance from my supervisors, Professor Welby Ings and Professor Hinimato McNeil. E kore e mimiti te puna mihi ki a kōrua. Finally, the images again from the portraits in this book were taken by Marcos Stiegel. The image in the middle there is a feather, or a raukura, which is an image that I refer to quite a lot, as you'll see in the Rere book. And it was a way of trying to articulate the mana, or the dignity that all of us possess, but in particular this was a dedication to the Takatapui people who, like I said at the beginning, often nameless or erased from our world, but have definitely shaped my world and the worlds of others, other Takatapui people. I also dedicated the Rere book to one of my friends who passed away during my PhD journey, and I really wanted him to be a part of it, to be a participant, but we lost him too early, and so I didn't know how to, I guess, give an acknowledgement to him in particularly, because he really shaped who I was growing up as an adult and understanding who I was. And then finally on the right side is my first ever children's book that was published at the beginning of the year. And this was a gift. I saw it as an opportunity to give back to, or to leave something for our tamariki mokopuna, for our children and grandchildren who in a way innately know who they are, but have never been able to articulate what that was for themselves. And I was hoping that this would be a way of telling their story and providing a space for them to feel like they do belong in their ao Māori, regardless of how they might express their way of being or in terms of gender identities. Yeah. Okay, finally, just as I wrap up, I just want to again emphasise that poi is a tool that I've used for myself and many other takatapu have used as a way of expressing themselves where we haven't been able to articulate it through words, and hopefully through performance and a practice of our expression through poi or through kapahaka has been able to really reaffirm who they are, but to also remind themselves of their own strength. And again, going back to the idea that poi originates from men, but today in our contemporary society, our takatapu people have claimed poi as a way of showing their fluidity between the physical and metaphysical, things that we can't really articulate in a physical sense, but innately know that it's there spiritually. So the following item that I'm about to perform is taken from a kapahaka group from Te Aroa Waka, and this item talks to the divine feminine nature of our females, but how, I guess in my case, I'm able to use that as a way of expressing my feminine nature in poi. So I hope you enjoy.